Hey everyone, it's Bethany from Bethan Books here and welcome back to this book nook. Today I really wanted to share with you how to get your hands on some free ACKS. So for those of you who don't know, ACKS stands for Advanced Reading Copies, and publishers hand these out to readers, yourself, myself alike, with the hopes, oh, my braid is caught on an earring, with the hopes that we will essentially review and like the book, hopefully, and promote the book. And so this video is going to encompass 4 of my top tips on how to get your hands on some of these ACKS, as well as a mini ACK haul of books that I've recently received and I'm going to read as soon as I can. Gosh, I look so sweaty today, guys, just ignore it. It was winter, like literally was here this morning, and it is now 3 p.m. and look outside. I was not prepared for this. So my first tip is to have a presence online. Have a space where you share all of your book reviews and stuff. You need to have a platform in order to promote books. So if you don't have one, it's highly unlikely that publishers are going to let you read the ACKS. Personally, I have a Bookstagram account, and that's where I started with my bookish content. I then dabbled in having a book blog, but honestly, it didn't go so well and I wasn't having the most fun. So I now have a BookTube account. You don't need a BookTube account if you don't feel comfortable putting yourself out there in video format. That is fine. I managed to get my hands on some ebook ACKS just with my Bookstagram account. You also need to make sure that you don't just have the platform, you have the presence. So updating, posting, I'm talking about Instagram here because that's what I'm familiar with. Posting hopefully every day. I'm saying this right now after not posting for a week, but we'll just pretend that's not a thing. Try to post daily if you can, and stories are a really good way to interact with your audience as well. If you have this platform updated and you interact with people on it as well as other people's accounts, publishers and authors alike might reach out to you first, asking you if you want to review their book. So you've got your platform, what next? Well, step number 2 is to start reaching out yourself. My favorite website for this is netgalley.com, and this is a place where you create a profile, you write your bio in, you link in your platforms, and then essentially you just browse, like your online shopping, you browse all of these books that publishers and authors have put on the website and you request them. Look, like real talk, you don't always get them all. I think I've gotten maybe 50% of the books I've requested. And you also have to make sure you do review and send the people the link to your reviews. NetGalley has a really easy process for that. It's quite hassle-free and user-friendly. And I myself have been using that platform for about a year now, and I do like it quite a bit. The alternative site to this is a place called Book Sirens. This is actually a new one to me, and admittedly I haven't used it, but the creator of Book Sirens reached out to me and said, hey, check this out. And once I've finished reading all my ACKS that I'm going to show you in a few minutes, I'm definitely going to check out Book Sirens. It sounds like a very similar way of using NetGalley, although it syncs your Goodreads books and helps give you recommendations, which I really want to play around with. It sounds great. My third tip for getting your hands on an ACK is for yourself to reach out to publishers. For example, you might be aware that a book's coming out and you just want to find out who the publisher is and send an email. Be patient, don't oversend the emails. I doubt the person on the receiving end appreciates this. Just, hello, state why you want the book, why you're interested in it, and of course, always link back to your platforms because they want to see that, it's a fair trade. Oh, I had to pause for a second, but hopefully this angle is okay. The fourth tip is be active on Goodreads. Why? I've actually received a couple of ACKS through pages I have joined on Goodreads. One I use for New Zealand people, if you're a Kiwi, is Turning Pages, which is a Penguin publishers group. And sometimes they announce, hey, we've got this book coming out, there are some ACKS, fill in the survey in our group and we might give it to you, which is another way, obviously, to get your hands on some ACKS. So what ACKS do I currently have on my list to read? I have 8 and I'm excited for all of them. 2 I've already mentioned in previous videos. The first one is Glasstown Wars, which is a young adult sci-fi, which is apparently inspired by the Bronte sisters, and I'm super intrigued to see how a techie kind of vibe of a book is inspired by such classic authors. It's about virtual worlds, people in real life coming together, saving things. It kind of sounds like if Warcross met Ready Player One, which is such a vibe. And that one is by Celia Reese, and that one actually came out like 2 years ago. So even though it's still an ACK, they can be older published books. My next ACK is Throwaway Girls, written by Andrea Contos. This is a young adult mystery with LGBT representation, and it follows this girl who essentially is keeping her head down, laying low. She can't wait to leave her school and her town behind, when of course what happens? A mystery occurs and she is just sucked into it and essentially tries to figure things out, and of course that means she isn't as free as she hoped she was. That one came out on the 1st of September this year. The next one is Monstrous Hat by Claire McKenna, which is an adult fantasy romance that came out at the beginning of this year. So again, another ACK that I got my hands on after it was published, which is sometimes the case. It follows our main female character who takes over looking after a lighthouse, and then all of these mysterious whispers occur around her neighbour who supposedly kills leviathans and reportedly killed his wife. So it's a little bit mysterious, a little bit spooky. It sounds like it's set in a really cool ocean setting. Another September the 1st, 2020 release is 1789. It is an anthology. So this is a team of authors who are writing stories, and it sounds like they are based on fact. They are just retelling things that happened from different perspectives, all set within that year. And I'm really excited to read something historical but with a short story format, because I feel for me that is a more accessible and manageable way to read historical fiction, as it isn't something I often do read. And that is also a September the 1st release. I cannot remember if I said that or not. You then have The Bonefire, which is a Romanian fantasy adult fiction novel. And I'm really going to butcher this name, I apologise. Is it Georgi Dragoman and Paul Oltreri? Was the translator, so yay for a translated text. The blurb, it's easy to read it for this case, is a chilling and suspenseful story set in the wake of a violent revolution about a young girl rescued from an orphanage by an otherworldly grandmother she's never met. It sounds almost like a fairy tale in a real world setting, which I'm extremely intrigued about. This is also a backlog ACK, which was published in 2017. Interestingly, it has quite a high rating, which is quite rare, I find, for ACKs which were published so long ago. But either way, I'm really excited to read this. I've got really high expectations, which isn't always a good thing, but I'm sure it deserves it. The next one I have here is The City of Zerdai. This is written by Maria V. Snyder, and it is book 2 in a series called The Archives of the Invisible Sword. I got book 1 out at the library. This is a case, and let this be a warning, and sometimes when you apply for ACKs online, you don't always know if it is the first or second book. I mean, probably in this case, it said it was the second book. I was just too excited to read something by Maria V. Snyder, who I used to read as a teen quite a bit. So I was just like, yeah, please, please, please. So I went back and did a little bit of research, and it was actually pretty good timing because this book is actually published next year on June the 1st. So this is a young adult fantasy. It has some little themes of love in there, and it's about our main character who, honestly, this is how I would describe it. It's like Tomb Raider meets Pirates of the Caribbean, with her being kind of this cool, quirky character like Jack Sparrow is. Also meets Indiana Jones, and also the representation in it is so good. So this is a case where I've read the first book, managed to get my hands on an ACK for the second book, and I am really, really excited for it. The next one, and perhaps the one I am most honoured to receive, is Marie Lu's new book called Sky Hunter. So kind of in her classic area, it is a young adult fantasy dystopian novel, and it comes out on September the 29th, 2020. Now with ACKs, you should aim to be able to talk about them before or on their published date. So this is what I'm going to try my hardest to get to. Same with all of those September the 1st ones, but obviously sometimes you're a bit late with them, and although it's not the end of the world, I always strive to treat the published date as a deadline. For those books who were published in 2017, I don't feel like there's such a priority on them. Doesn't mean they're not as good, but in the world of wanting to feel like you're a reliable source in the publisher's perspective to keep receiving acts and to keep talking about them. I think that's a good standard to uphold, treating the publication date like a review due date. But anyway, what's this book about? There is a refugee, there is fighting for land, there is having to unite unlikely people and characters together, and just this idea of land being part of one's culture. But unfortunately, people kind of come in and do the equivalent of colonizing and destroying entire races for corporate greed. So all of those were e-ACKs. I have my first ever physical ACK, which is so special to me. This is The Book of Coralie by M.R. Carey. I actually haven't read anything by this author before, but the blurb sucked me in. And this is also a case of someone reaching out to me on my Instagram account. So the other ones I showed you, I'm pretty sure I'm correct in saying they were all NetGalley requests, I think. But this was one where author and their publisher / publicist reached out to me. So this will always hold a special place in my heart for that very own sentimental reason. But it is an adult fantasy sci-fi. So it's set in a post-apocalyptic world. Our main character is very familiar with his surrounding forest, but they're always told not to go beyond the wall. But then it's kind of I'm guessing he has to go beyond the wall because it's all about what is out there. So it's kind of like an adventure story. It sounds very Maze Runner meets like a forest kind of vibe, which I am all about that life. And this came out in April this year, and it is very high up there on my priorities list just because I think it's the polite thing to do. Read things that are given to you if you are not overwhelmed. And that's the last thing I want to talk about is, like, especially with NetGalley, they say you should have an 80% feedback ratio for all the books that you receive. If you have heaps and heaps of ACKs stacking up, I do not recommend that you keep applying for some. Sure, if there's one that is like, oh my gosh, I need to read that, apply for it. But make sure you're not overwhelming yourself if you create a NetGalley account. That is, I found, like I've said, a decent amount of people will give you a yes and you can download it. So you need to be aware that books take time to read, and you just don't want to put so many books and pages and words on your shoulders that you collapse and reading becomes work. I personally have given myself a little bit of an ACK request break. I said, right, I've got 8 books. I'm going to finish this Bookopoly-a-thon that I am currently in the midst of participating in, and then I'm going to kick ass and read all of these ACKs before moving on to the rest of my like physical or Goodreads TBR. So I hope you found the 4 tips and my ACK haul intriguing. Let me know if you yourself are going to try out any of these tips or any ACKs you have on your list that you cannot wait to read about. With that being said, enjoy all the places you go in your own reading adventures, and follow me to keep up to date with all the bookish goodness that I will post in the near future. See you in the next one. Bye, team.